Welcome back, everybody, to Harbinger of Faith Digital Ministry Channel. My name is Jake.
I'm Randy, guys. Welcome back. Thank you. We got our 600th view today. Really appreciative of it, and we really thank the viewers out there.
Tonight's study is the narrow path, and Randy, this comes out of the book of Matthew, and one of the most powerful chapters in the entire New Testament, which is chapter 7 of Matthew. And we're going to look at a few verses in there. If you've never read Matthew chapter 7, you may be under the impression that Jesus is a very quiet and reserved and really doesn't put it to people. But when you read Matthew chapter 7, I think you come away with a completely different view of who Jesus really was. He was the type of person that when he ran across people who weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, especially the Pharisees, the religious, he let them have it. And this is some pretty incredible stuff.
Sounds good. Let's get to it.
All right. First verse is the narrow and wide gates, Matthew chapter 7, 13 through 14. Randy, you mind reading that for us?
Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many may enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few will find it.
Yeah. And one of the things that really sticks out to me is because the way I think people think sometimes is that he's talking about, they think that Jesus is talking about people who just simply don't believe in God. That's going to be left out. And I don't think that's the case, and I'll tell you why, Randy, because if you think about who the audience that Jesus was talking to, these were fellow Jews. These were the children of God. These were people who heard that there's a prophet of God out speaking, and they went to find him. And Jesus is talking to, really the audience here is the religious. Mm-hmm. Not atheists. He's talking about the religious, as we'll see in some of the other verses. So the narrow path is that there's going to be a lot of people who try to find the true path to salvation, the true path to Jesus. But what Jesus is saying, out of those people, only a few find it. And that's a scary thing. It really is. It bothers me sometimes, but...
So backsliding Christians may not be there in the end.
Yeah. I think it's even deeper than backsliding Christians, Randy. I think it goes back to pride, man. People that look down on others, Jesus is always at odds with those people. Looking down on the poor, not treating the poor correctly, looking down on other people, judging others. Matthew 7 starts out with a pretty harsh warning against do not judge. He basically says do not judge. Don't do it.
Very hard thing for us to do, too.
Yeah, it is. It's one of my struggles for sure.
Okay.
By their fruit, Matthew 7:15 through 20, Randy.
Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them.
So, along with the narrow gate and the narrow path, Jesus tells us that there's going to be false prophets come, and they're going to come to you in sheep's clothing. And to me, what that means, Randy, is the easy path. They're going to, we were just talking about the narrow gate, and wide is the road that leads to destruction. Narrow gate leads to life. Usually when you think, when I'm driving in a car or maybe even on my motorcycle and I see a dirt road off to the side, I think, well, I don't want to go down that road. there may be a pothole, there may be a mud hole I can't get through. It's going to be difficult. I may have to get out of my car, so I just don't go down it. And I think what Jesus is saying here, that there's going to be a lot of false prophets come, and they're going to water down Christianity. They're going to water down the faith, and they're going to say how easy this is. You don't have to do anything. All you got to do is believe, and that's it. And you're going to be just fine. And anybody who don't believe that, well, to me, James chapter 2 pretty much nips that in the bud.
So it's going to have to be a little. It's the true path is going to be the one that's hard. I mean, it's hard to be a Christian. It's not going to be set up and structured where it's okay for us to, have. It's not going to be structured that way. It's going to be structured where it's hard. It's not meant to accept everybody. Kind of meant that the ones that put their whole heart in it, put everything they got, every day, every minute, past, present, and future. Not so much past when you repent, but I mean, it's an everyday deal.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be something that's going to be really hard.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the other thing that I think about is Jesus very clearly, he says, wide is the road. In other words, many try to enter through the gate, but wide is the road that leads to destruction. Only a few find the narrow gate. So not only, Randy, I think you're right. I think it is a little bit harder road to hold if you're 100% devoted to God, but it's also, most people are not going to take the narrow path. Most people are going to follow these false prophets. So
Path's easier.
Yeah.
A lot less stuff to do.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Continuing on, Matthew 7:21 through 23, true and false disciples. Go ahead, Randy.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
Yeah, so one, I think this is one of the scariest verses that Jesus says, because he basically says, look, there's going to be people who believe, they come to Jesus. They're obviously believers in Jesus, but they don't follow his will. They don't do what he says, because he says very plainly, he says, only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. What is the will of the Father? Well, one is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And two,
love your neighbor.
That's right. So those that don't follow these big commandments here, taking care of each other, taking care of their neighbor, watching out for each other, I think that's where Jesus is really going to, draw the line, showing love to each other. And, taking care of other people versus taking care of yourself, it's hard, it's difficult, it's not easy. And you know what? One of the things, my mom and I were talking about this today, Renee, it's easy to write a check, man. It's easy to write a check. It's hard to get in there and help people, putting in hours, time, money, blood, tears, sweat, whatever it takes. That is hard to do, and it takes a lot of faith to get in there and do
It's
stuff
easy to
like
do
that.
stuff like go to church on Sunday and Wednesday. You're structured that way. You did it. You're good, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to go out and love your neighbor and every day serve God instead of serving yourself.
Yeah.
That's a real hard thing to do. Pride's a real tricky thing, and it's hard to do your works in humility and love God. I mean, it's a daily check. It's probably 3 times a day check.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Like it. Good job. All right. That is the end of the Narrow Path study. We've always got our website, harbingeroffaith.org. If you want to go visit it. We've got an email, harbingeroffaith@gmail.com. If you've got any questions, suggestions, or any kind of comments or anything, if you're having trouble leaving it on YouTube, a friend of mine told me that he was having trouble leaving a comment. So feel free to email us. We really appreciate your help. If you can, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, or give us an email. If you've got a topic you want us to address, or maybe you've got questions about a previous study, we'd really appreciate any feedback.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great night.